Have you ever seen someone being weird after a toxic relationship? People who have been victims to narcissistic abuse often start to act a little weird in the eyes of their environment. Join me today as we explore 10 strange behaviors acquired over time as a result of narcissistic abuse. 1. Over-apologizing. Those who have experienced narcissistic abuse have to constantly apologize, even for things they had no way of controlling. This compulsion to apologize comes from years of being accused of everything and anything by their narcissistic abuser. 2. Hypervigilance. A common behavior is hypervigilance. Victims are perpetually on high alert, always on the lookout for signs of danger or disapproval. This is a coping mechanism they learned to use after growing up in an environment where they were always walking on eggshells. 3. People-pleasing. For those who have experienced narcissistic abuse, people-pleasing is second nature. They are driven to please everyone and everything, often at the cost of their own needs and well-being. 4. Decision-making difficulty. Narcissistic abuse victims have a hard time making decisions. They second-guess themselves and worry about making the wrong decision, a consequence of being perpetually undermined by their abuser. 5. Self-isolation. Narcissistic abuse victims are very isolated oftentimes from friends and family. They feel misunderstood and no one understands them. 6. Dissociation from reality, fantasy proneness. The cognitive dissonance, denial, and gaslighting victims experience over years warps their sense of objective reality versus subjective distortion, and they are literally at risk of dissociative absorption into highly detailed private fantasies and false narratives that compensate with escapist sanctuary for their unlivable conditions. This ideation, woven into fantasy, cleaves to become a principal coping mechanism in opposition to the harsh realities shattering their psyche. Friends tell stories of these bizarre conversational non-sequiturs where victims inexplicably teleport into idly role-playing wildly unrealistic scenarios with whole backstories, as if briefly transmitting from an alternate astral plane's complex headworlds. They lose their hold on objective truths outside imaginal retreats that soothe their traumatized inner children. Lovers see them always elsewhere despite corporeal presence. 7. Pathological need for attention. Starved from the narcissist. Deprivation abuse, trauma repositions most of the former victim's self-worth dependencies onto the endlessly seeking external validation and excessive focus. After being starved for so long, pale shadows of their former selves, their need for constant praise and validation from others is a pathological compulsion that bears only a passing resemblance to their abuser's narcissistic supply-demand. You'll spot them relentlessly touting achievements, preening contributions, opening discussions about COVID-19 versus the flu, or stuffing humble brags into every sentence, and endlessly stroking the egos of new sycophants to prop up the gauzy litanies that constitute their tenuous self-worth reserves. The sort of public desperation that begs to be noticed, to be revered by anyone who will pay them some attention. Underlying these endless compensation schemes are unreconciled core traumas learned from their own abuse history. 8. Low self-esteem. A common result of narcissistic abuse is low self-esteem. Constant belittlement translates into a lack of sense of worth and inadequacy for victims. 9. Cycles of suppressed fury management. Over time, however, even as they outwardly acquiesce, victims' simmering resentments eventually coalesce into PTSD-fueled rageful explosions they initially eschewed. Repetitive emotional flashbacks invoke freeze, fight, or flight reactions, releasing built-up psychotraumas in circular expressive purges. Their internalized rage is all the more pallid for being relieved by screaming matches, terrifying terroristic outbursts of violence, and dramatic huffy, sullen, silent treatments. This period of episodic cathartic blow-ups inevitably is followed by Stygian shame, regret, leading to desperate love-bombing, hoovering, love-lorn retractions, and pleas for forgiveness ad infinitum. They build their suppression back up until their indignant rage explodes once more. This cycling fervor goes on an identifiable sin confession repenitence, sin perpetual loop, while the unresolved traumas stack up without check. 10. The end of soulless disassociation. Apathy, at their most extinguished, chronically traumatized victims plaintively check out from the inside. This dissociative stupor manifests as empty flattening of affect, episodic amnesia, relentless fatigability, robotic daily functioning on autopilot, gross indifference to previously uplifting events. An almost Westworld robot host who continuously reboots, unable to maintain an identity except as a reaction to immediate impulses. They're completely MIA in spirit, involuntarily shielding or proactively giving themselves to the reality of total dehumanization. Unable to face the pain anymore, they become a version of themselves that has ascended to a place that is battered into submission to not feel anything. Family and friends look in horror as the beloved relatives and friends they once knew vanish before their eyes, replaced by depleted anhedonic husks without a spark or even the animating life force behind their vacant gazes. These behaviors can help us be more empathetic and supportive of those who have survived narcissistic abuse. With the right assistance, it is not only possible to take back control of your life and health, but also it is recommended that you do so.